All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. So to get us started today, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Ngunnawal people, the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I'd like to extend especially extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us here today. So thank you for joining us for the second session of the Parbery Change webinar series. So today we're joined by a very special guest, my fellow principal in the change practice at Parbery, Michelle Wicks. Michelle, you joined us on a pretty auspicious day. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. Can you hear me okay? Because I've just got some new headsets on. So
perfectly.
Oh, good. Thank you. Yeah. So hello, everybody, and happy International Women's Day on this fabulous day. I'm streaming to you also from Gubby Gubby land up in the Sunshine Coast today. So for those of you that don't know me, my name's Michelle Wicks. As Dan said, I joined him at Parbery, and my background is in digital transformations predominantly, a lot of years across all aspects of Queensland Health, and most recently in Services Australia, and working with some of the federal government agencies down there, preparing them for their Gov ERP onboarding experience. So that's me. Thank you.
Welcome, Michelle. Great to have you here today. Kim does send his apologies for those who joined us last week. Kim is the principal, looks after the change practice and a number of other practices within the delivery space. He's actually tied up on client site today, so it's Michelle and I doing the delivery. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Dan, fellow principal with Michelle. I've been doing change for an awfully long period of time across large multinational companies. I've been specialising in federal government and defence for nearly 3 years now, since I've been down in Canberra, but you know, a passionate changing, and I've been doing it for an awfully long period of time. So without further ado, let's jump into the presentation for today. So this is the second in the Parbery webinar series slides. So as we talked through, and apologies last week for anyone who joined, I was quite ill. Turns out I had COVID, and I've been under the weather pretty badly for about a week now. Feeling better though, still obviously working remotely. So yeah, we had a little bit of a lackluster, I think, presentation last time. But look, what we're going to do over the next, well, today and another 4 weeks, is we'll take you through the Parbery methodology that we've created. So this is our change methodology. It leverages a number of different types of methodology. So we've taken the best of things like ProSci, APGM, Global Change Management Practitioner Handbook. You know, we've used some of the psychological principles that are adhered to it, and taken what we think is the best of breed of tools to use to create an end-to-end change process. We've also designed it in line with the concept of a standard 2-pass business case process, very commonly used throughout defence and throughout federal government, and align those stages to that process. So last week, obviously, we went through assessing the change. So this would be pre-gate 0, or, you know, at the business case side of things. Today, we're going to dive a little bit more into scoping the change. So this is, you know, we're now in the process of, we've got a bit of an idea about what we're doing, because we've done some, you know, finger in the air kind of high level stuff just to get a feel for it. But now we're actually going to really sort of unpack, what does this change mean? You know, so that we can properly enable our leaders and our people to deliver that change. So I'm a huge advocate of change impact assessments. Anyone who's worked with me will know that I bang on about those an awful lot. We'll talk about those today in a little bit more detail. We'll look at things like stakeholders and you know, assessing your stakeholders and where they need to be, how to assess your organisational readiness, start to think about things like, how do you build a change strategy? How do you assess your communications needs? You know, look for the benefits and what they might be. And obviously, we'll be thinking about risks through this assessment process as well. So that's where we're going to dive in today. Michelle, anything you'd like to add around that?
No, Dan, that's brilliant. I think it'll be interesting conversations as we go through a little bit more about people's different experiences and perceptions of change impact assessments, and definitely supporting the leaders to lead the change, and our role in that as changes, as you say. So, looking forward to the session with you.
Awesome. So let's jump into my favourite, and I know some of the people I work with probably least favourite. Part of the change assessment. But to me, I always start with what is the change impact assessment. So my take is, as change managers, what we're doing is we're looking at where is the business today, where does it need to be tomorrow, and what is the gap. And the change is the gap. So when we say we're change managers, we're managing the gap. If we haven't properly defined what that gap is and fully understand it and be able to communicate it clearly and concisely to our leaders and other people, then we get really waffly, bit washy in our language. We can end up with a lot of field opinions going around the place. So you're getting this evidence-based approach to things, I think, is really important. I know, Michelle, you're probably similar.
Yeah, and I think the other important thing there to highlight, Dan, is that we know that the change impact assessment, it isn't a one-off thing, and it will need to evolve as your change plan and actions and strategies. The more you know about the future state, so it might be quite loose in the beginning, depending on how complex and how prepared and detailed the change initiative is, and so understanding that current state will evolve over time the more you know. So it is very fluid, and I think that's an important thing to make. You can't just do this one off and think that's it, it's great, we've done it. So.
Yeah, totally. It's an iterative process, right? As the end state becomes clearer, the fidelity that you can get around your change becomes greater. It's a living and breathing activity. I'll pause here too. If there's any questions from the participants, feel free to drop off your mics and jump in and join the conversation. This is meant to be very informal.
Interactive. Any insights that other people have come across? I know some of the change impact assessments, and especially when you're working in programs that might be more waterfall based, and it's very, you do this by this date and then this, that can be quite a challenge for change managers to get across that this is iterative, and you start where you start and you work along the way.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? I like to say prolific beats perfect. So I'd rather be doing little good things each day than worrying about trying to do one massive perfect thing in 6 months' time, because
which you'll have to go back and rejig anyway. So
exactly, yeah. I mean, I know Taylor loves change impact assessments. I noticed she's been very quiet.
That's my most favorite thing in the world, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Taylor.
Yeah.
I must say, I do love undertaking that current state assessment. It really does help you unpack so many insights that we can then inform and be arming our leaders with that information. I think it's a challenge for leaders in that space, and that they've got their business as usual to deliver. They've got strategic plans, operational plans. They're constantly in that space, that having a change manager come in that's quite objective, you don't necessarily know the business, that's where you can start to unpack how things work now, and where some of those change actions and change strategies will really help those leaders with that. Now, I see there's a comment in the chat. Yeah. Change goals seem to change throughout the process. So how does that impact your initial objectives? Yeah, that's right. Exactly, Steve. Change goals can change, and I think that's where for me as well, understanding what the program is like as well, how ambiguous it is, how complex it is, has it been done before, what's the environment like that you're you know, that change is going to happen in, and, you know, adjusting your change style to that as well, your change goals, taking, you know, the principles of agile or lean, or, you know, being responsive, being able to adjust those along the way. I do think it's a challenge.
Yeah, look, I mean, yeah, and I've flicked across to the next slide, Michelle, because it was a beautiful segue.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. That, you know, depending on where you're at within your organization, you've got some, I guess what I call kind of hygiene factors that you would use to assess the change. So there's going to be some basic stuff like, how big is the change? Are you changing a team, a department, multiple departments? Are you bringing together entire agencies? Michelle and I, and actually Taylor and Christina, have all previously worked on GovERP. Which was 96 agencies. I think it was like 145,000 APS that are impacted by it. So they can be really big in scale, or they can be quite small. You know, it's just a customer service team that's using a new telephone system. You know, and it'll come down to the number of employees, the type of change, you know, the technology MOG that we've kind of talked about, and, you know, how big is that gap? You know, I use all the time a really basic analogy. It's like, you know, if somebody gets a new version of iPhone, the question is, what is their current state? You know, have they just gone from a Nokia 6110 to an iPhone? Because if they have, then, you know, they're in for a whole world of change, right? But if you're going from an iPhone 12 to an iPhone 14, you know, it's probably very minimal. So that kind of gives you that feel for where are they today and tomorrow. So that's hygiene stuff. That's really measurable. You know, and then you've got organizational elasticity, which is something that I kind of like as a concept. In that I think about, if I was to go into Google today and deliver a change, one assumes, based on the reputation and marketing and all the rest of the stuff that I see, never worked for Google, but I would assume I could rock in there and go, hey guys, guess what? We're doing a new cool thing. We're rolling an AI out. Maybe that's not a great thing to do for Google, which they did a few weeks ago, if you saw their share price. But you know, you know, you'd expect them to be going, yeah, like we have, you know, leadership that's about you know, changing things and challenging norms, and you know, our management predisposition to innovation is really high. You know, they've probably had good experiences with innovation. That's why they work in that space. You know, so culturally, you'd expect them to be really just on the money and jump in. Now, full disclosure, my brother is a lawyer, so I'm allowed to tease them. So I think about, if I was to go to the College of Law and do the same thing and go, hey guys, guess what? Tomorrow we're going to do this brand new thing. There would probably be an awful lot, if my brother's anything to go by at least, you know, evaluation, prosecution, and pulling every single word apart to understand, you know, what that innovation is. So the cultural aspects can be really massive in that piece. So Steve, that's a really long way to come back and answer your question. But I think when we're doing change impact assessments, we're going to start looking at that hygiene kind of stuff, the stuff that we can quantify easily. What we will discover on the way through with those conversations and engaging with stakeholders is probably more of your organizational cultural stuff, which is as big, if not, I would say, a bigger influencer in the organization's capacity for change. So we'll need to adjust to, you know, to get the best possible benefit for the organization.
In the organisation. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
yep.
Exactly, Steve. Yeah.
Yep.
Feel free to come off mic and, you know,
yeah, jump in.
Join in.
But yeah, Michelle, I'm sorry, I've done a lot of talking in that last little bit. Any comments from yourself?
I think it is important to really understand how, you know, getting to that end point there of that change readiness and what that takes. Again, understanding that impact from all those different lenses is really useful. I think, you know, gone are the days where a, you know, 50-page change management plan is your best tool. I think today people are busier. They do want to work in a more visual way, being able to connect with information simply through storytelling and visual elements. I think all of that helps in that assessing the impact part and understanding that organisational elasticity from all those different perspectives, and looking at that capacity and appetite for change. I think they're really important elements, and bringing a lens of sort of the contemporary ways, depending on your project, as we said before, will really help in that change readiness piece.
Yeah, I really think I don't know, this is probably an oversimplification, but I like to say if you want everyone on one page, on the same page, just have one page.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, like, is that not self-evident? It's like, once we create these multi-page documents, it just, people just don't have time to consume them. So excellent. We'll move on a little bit, I guess. So with the goal of these sessions, so when we've built this webinar series, what we've aimed to do is to give a tool or a process that the attendees can, at the end of the session, take away and actually apply. So what I thought I'd do is I'd take a little bit of time to talk you through how I would generally approach a change impact assessment. The first thing you would normally do is you'd look for your standard lenses to use. These are variable, but I like people, process, technology, mindset, behaviours. You've got your couple of process ones, you've got a couple of cultural ones. 5 is a good number. It's a good number of lenses. I have worked with one particular band one, which I won't name and shame on the phone call, who wanted 17 lenses in his change impact assessment. Which you can imagine by the time you multiply that by teams and roles and all the rest of the stuff, was probably a little excessive. But we just start with the general 5, and then what I would do is I would then start setting up stakeholder interviews, generally talking with the team lead or their 2IC, depending on who is available to talk through, or potentially both of them at the same time. And I would go into that meeting with them with as much information as I can to explain to them, this is what's changing, this is what's driving the change, this is the vision for the change, this is what we see as the target future state, and then allow them to unpack with me, how big is that change going to be from their people perspective, their technology, process, mindset, behaviors kind of opinions. And then you're going to have to do some stuff which is probably not as quantitative as some people would like, but you will need to make a bit of a value judgment. You go, well, that's a high, medium, or low. So.
I agree there, Dan. You don't need to get the science absolutely right. I've seen change managers go to the nth degree, down to nearly trying to get it to the finest point, and it doesn't really add any value. So it is always about weighing up the value. Is this going to give us enough insight? Because that's what it's about. It's giving us enough insights to work with the leaders to help them lead this change. And getting a number or a score down to the nth degree, I haven't seen today to add significant value.
I remember many years ago, I was leading a large piece of change work for ANZ Wealth, and one of the BAs had actually gone through and they'd taken their level 4 processes and they'd mapped their today level 4 processes and they'd mapped their future state level 4 processes, and then they'd done a like for like. This is staying, this is staying, this is changing, this is staying, right? And it was many, many, many pages deep of an Excel spreadsheet. They'd spent months producing it, and at the end of the day, it was completely useless because nobody, not even the people doing the job on the day, could understand, what this particular tool was trying to convey. Once we pulled it up a couple of levels and went, oh, guess what? You're going to use this registry system, not this registry system, but you're going to do the same, but the SysAct still applies. That became meaningful.
Sorry, and Michelle,
can you? Yes.
Hey, Steve.
Who's that?
Steve, sorry.
Yay!
So at this point in time of the process, I'm a newbie to change, but is this where you'd also be referring to like risk analysis within project management at the same time to sort of help with this criteria?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, sorry, Michelle, I'll let you take that question. I've done too much talking.
No. That great question, Steve. And I think this is where it is also so fundamental for change managers to be linking with project or program managers. So that you know, they've got very much a technical product delivery perspective, and then this brings in that people, process, business perspective, and definitely identifying those risks. Because if you've got a whole workforce that you know, whatever impacts you find, that could significantly impact or be a risk to the project, be it a delivery date, how well they'll get it over the line. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how great your product is that you deliver and build, if people don't use it, it's
Yeah.
not,
Like, there's no time in the day for the people side of things, and massive.
Yeah, absolutely. So having that site, you know, really, I just constantly see change managers and project managers have to work side by side, all the way through from the outset. This isn't at a pointy end thing, and I think that sometimes, you know, this change impact assessment can leave you know, the wrong impression in that it does need to cover all of those aspects. So, you know, the more experienced change managers know how to bring that together and leverage risks and even opportunities. There could be opportunities that you identify through this process that you want to share. There could be a niche little area that, you know what, if we piloted it in there first, boy, you're going to get some quick wins. So you've really got to take still that, you know, the foundational risk issue opportunity mindset into these types of things as well.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Michelle. With this little hypothetical output from a change impact assessment we've got, you know, you could turn around if you have a look at our first leader here. You know, we've identified that there's a big mindset constraint around that. Now, you know, where we're saying that's a potential high impact, that also means that something needs to be managed very closely. So our strategy for, hey, this is a high impact area, is going to actually lead to essentially a risk that we're going to then proactively manage. And like Michelle said, you could actually say, hey, guess what? This leader has had a really bad experience with this thing the last 4 times we've tried to do it. You know, so why don't we actually pilot it in their area, and then they can put their fingerprints on it and have ownership of it. All of a sudden, we've shifted the mindset and reduced that risk, and potentially, you know, got some really, hopefully create an advocate for our change as well.
Yeah, great strategy. Thanks, Dan.
The other thing there too, Steve, and others, sharing this actively with your project and program managers as well brings them on the journey. And I think that's important. The more we can educate and engage and bring project and program managers on the journey of the people side, because at the end of the day, we're on the journey with them from the change side, the product side, the tech, if it's tech, whatever it is, and we're making sure we're advocating that and you know, translating that to the business. It's just as important for us to be translating that back. So then, you know, together we're both on the same page. We're in this together to get it over the line. The more you can do that, you know, the more successful or likelihood that the change will be successful.
Sure. So in reality, how often does that happen where project or these risk analysis are brought to the table at this point in time? Is it a matter of going back?
Do you mean in projects in general out there in the world?
Yeah, like as a change manager, when you're at this stage assessing the impact, are you sort of having these discussions on your own as a change with the stakeholders, or is the risk being presented at the same time?
I think. Oh, you go, Dan. You do this one.
I was going to say, for me, it's always lockstep with the PM.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, we want to keep the PM across what we're doing. So keeping them across to the conversations, and indeed providing back insights to allow them to go, hey, look, there's a tricky stakeholder over here, keep an eye out for them, so we're sharing our intelligence on the way through.
Yes.
And to come back to your question, Steve, I would say if you've got a good changey, this happens at this stage every time. Unfortunately, quite often it doesn't though.
Yeah, okay. Sure.
And
Thanks.
I think again as well, Steve, just to not one size fits all. So just making sure that you're constantly looking for the opportunities. Is this an opportunity for me to bring somebody else in now? Could this raise alarms that we don't need to yet? Do I need to unpack a bit more? So it really is, you've got to get those change managers that have that experience to be able to unpack, use that intel to, identify when do I need to bring this person in? Is this the right time? Do I need more in the room? So it really is that whole drawing on our experiences and all those tools Dan talked about and
environment. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. No worries.
Excellent. That's actually, again, Steve, great questions, because I think you've just produced the perfect segue to go across to looking at our stakeholders. And this is another thing which I think is a change maturity conversation, because what I've found, particularly with people new to change, is they're like, hey, we need everybody to drink the Kool-Aid, and everybody has to be 100% on board. What the reality is one, it's very unlikely that's ever going to occur, and two, it's probably not necessary. So as part of going through and unpacking our change impacts and working with our stakeholders, what we need to be doing is thinking about where are they on an influence scale, and where do we need them to be. So I've just got a little bit of an example here. You can see we've got stakeholder group 1 here. What we've said is currently, based on assessment, they don't really know anything about what's going on, and they're probably a little bit negative towards it. All we really, though, need to do in reality is actually move them to understanding the concept and a little bit positive about it. We don't need to move everybody to institutionalized and, singing Kumbaya. But knowing where the right place to put them is super important. Michelle, jump on in.
Yeah, look, I think as well, understanding their level of impact from the change helps in that journey. So if they're more directly impacted and they're going to be the ones that are going to be the base, the front line, that this is it, it's massive. We do need them at the institutionalized end of the scale. But people that it might be that, maybe a report's going to change from them, being aware of that and knowing when it's coming through, that's okay. We don't need to. So understanding a combination of those levers and how to use them together is really quite helpful in that journey. And again, this should be constantly reviewed and updated, and the activities include just can be town halls, can be pulse surveys. I'm big on, I like to be on the ground or have people on the ground that can, hear the conversations at the water cooler in the kitchen and, feeding that back through your champions, finding those champions. That all of this, again, is that whole combination that we should be trying to draw on and being active. Just doing a document and a bit of paper around understanding stakeholders and that's it. That's not where the value comes from. It's those insights and putting it into practice and uniting people and addressing concerns. And I know one of the favourite things I was called when I was working in a big change project in Queensland Rail, I was called the floor walking Tim Tam lady. So every Friday I took Tim Tams with me and I walked the floors and I talked to people, and the insights you get from people who will chat over a Tim Tam is better than trying to sit down with a group and doing a formalised, okay, so where do you think you sit on the scale? And so I just encourage you to really use that combination.
Yeah, I definitely think as changes work, anyone who wants to do remote work as a change manager, I think is setting themselves up for failure. Although I'm remote working currently because I'm quarantined, but
it's a combination, and we do have to embrace that. But it isn't all about us being on the floor. It is also about leveraging the people on the floor in those real places. How do we tap into those people and get their insights and what's really going on out there? It's making that happen. And yes, we do have to embrace the hybrid way of working, but I must say there's nothing better than walking the floors with a pack of Tim Tams.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So look, we're just about done for today, and we are getting to 12:30, so I'm assuming some people will start dropping off now. But just as a bit of food for thought for anybody that is actually looking to plan their change and start thinking about the strategy. So, once we've been through this process, if you recall that initial list, we're getting down to sort of building a bit of a strategy and quantifying our risks. And I would really encourage you to, if you, pardon me, if you haven't come across it, have a look at the surprising truth about what motivates us by Dan Pink. It goes back to 2009. But it's a really powerful piece of experimental psychology, which actually says, there's a whole bunch of intrinsic motivators which are really, really important to tap into. And he talks about essentially purpose, mastery, and autonomy. And I would really encourage you to think about how do we as changes get the purpose or the vision for what we're trying to change front in mind with our leaders, with the person on the floor, and getting people to understand what that purpose is. Why do they need to do this, and what's the benefit for them? Create the autonomy, so allow people to pull information in, ask questions, create multiple channels of information as well. Just sending out a weekly communique is probably not sufficient. And again, to Michelle's point, being able to walk the floor, be approachable, encourage people to ask you questions, and building that change champion network, really important. And also encouraging people to take a bit of risk. This can be really, really hard to do because Michelle and I were running through this morning. We were having a little conversation. I was saying to her, my big takeaway with leaders is they want to be out and visible and leading their change. They just need to feel confident to do it, because you don't want to be out in front of a group of people and be embarrassed. But that's at every level. Every level, we want to be able to feel confident in how we're working and what we're doing. So encouraging people to say, you know what, you can play around with this. It's okay. You don't need to get it perfect every single time. It enables people to build and improve their skills. Great sort of pieces of philosophy. And I would encourage you to think about how can you fold these concepts into whatever the strategies you want to deliver.
Thanks, guys. It's been great. Just coming out of education institution over the last couple of decades, it's definitely been a massive gap that we've seen with school leadership, just not being visible, present, even just amongst the kids, let alone the teachers, and then expecting change. So, totally endorse what you're saying there about walking the floor, Michelle.
Yeah, thanks.
Excellent.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Yeah, that's it. So we'll be back here, same time, same place next week, where we'll have a look at planning the change milestones to success. So this is going to be a little bit more functional around, linking things in with your change milestones and what that delivery needs to look like. So thank you very much, everybody. If you've got any questions, please stay on the line. But other than that, have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
See you later.
Okay, I'll head off, Dan. I've got another meeting.
Yep. See you, Michelle. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.